You're muted, Yasha.
Okay, thanks for that. So I hope all you can hear me and also you can see my screen clearly.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Joanne, for kind introduction. So once again, I'm Nyasha Milanzi, and I'm not going to add much into my bio. I think she did a really good job of talking about what I do and my interests here at Michigan Tech. So I'm excited to share my experience at the United Nations conference on climate change that happened in last year in December in Dubai, and I attended as a delegate of Michigan Tech, and that was a really love experience. So I'm happy to share and answer any questions. So I'm just going to go right into it. Okay, so this is me. It's one of the sessions at the conference where they were talking about funding climate projects by young people, which was hosted by the Financial Times. So I just posted for a picture there so I could get one at Michigan Tech. At the conference. So before going to COP28, this was my first COP. I had a lot of expectations. I was also like, what is it going to be about? Everyone was talking about that it's a big conference, a lot of confusion. Yeah, most of the things were true. There were thousands and thousands of people, and a lot of confusion, but also a lot of solidarity and resilience and people working together to find solutions that can work for most communities that probably won't be represented on at the conference. Yeah, so that was good to experience and also be part of. So before I went to COP, I was interviewed by this newspaper called Investable News, and I shared most of my expectations of the COP. And I think one of my biggest expectation was I really wanted to see the adoption of the loss and damage fund, which was promised at COP27 in Egypt. So essentially, for anyone who doesn't know what the loss and damage fund is basically a fund to help those countries that are most impacted or those communities that are most impacted by climate change, and in most cases are not the one who actually caused climate change, to be able to recover from the losses and damages of the impacts of climate change. So for example, like let's say climate-induced droughts, storms, heat exhaustion, etc., etc. So on a glance, so looking back at the whole experience, I can simply say like COP28, like as a student and it's my first time there, I think it's really exceeded my expectations in the sense that I think I was really able to, first of all, I think I was really able to bridge those gaps between what I'm studying here in the United States and bridge it with like some of the challenges that some communities on the African continent are facing through engaging with young people, through engaging with my home country, say, Pavilion, and seeing some of the presentations that they were having and some of the projects that they are undertaking to fight climate change. I think that was really enlightening to me to see what other communities are doing, basically what my communities are doing. And yeah, And yes, so this is also me. I'm in the middle there wearing a black suit, and I'm surrounded by other four amazing, inspiring young Zimbabweans. And actually, all of them, they were actually young negotiators for the government of Zimbabwe. So that was really nice to, like, because for me, I was just an observer. So to see them dedicated and sometimes even leaving the conference midnight or after midnight, doing those negotiations, last minute negotiations to ensure that their voices is heard. That was really amazing to watch and make connections with. And also the other thing that I wanted to highlight is before we went to COP, so myself and Mercedes, I think you can also see her from the screen here, and these other amazing graduate students from all over the world, some from Australia, some here in the US and the UK, we collaborated and we organized 4 panels that we ran during the course of COP at the Michigan Tech Pavilion. And some of them, like one I led was which I'm going to talk about later, and the other one which Mercedes actually led, which was on climate education, and some were on how to bridge the gap between climate science and also climate policy, or in general, how can young climate researchers like ourselves be able to influence policy and or be influenced by policy, which is so that we can contribute meaningfully to the climate crisis. Yes, so this is the session that I moderated, which was on fossil fuel divestment in higher education institutions around the world. So here we were talking with student campaigners here from Michigan Tech, from other schools as well in Australia, and we also talked with professors. So, for example, our own professor from the Department of Social Sciences on energy policy here, and also we also talked with university administrators from University of Leeds so that we can bring different voices to the discussion to understand, like, what are the opportunities and also what are the challenges that universities are facing, so that they can commit to divesting their endowment from fossil fuels. Some of the speakers highlighted, like, divesting from fossil fuels is a very smart move for schools in terms of investment, attracting more investment, and also committing to their sustainability goals or intergenerational justice. And then this is also a picture that I took to the which is to your right. So this was an interesting dialogue. So this was it was different stakeholders who were interested in how indigenous communities can influence the policies at the global level, especially at COP. So here you see delegates from different countries representing indigenous peoples. You see indigenous peoples. You see local communities representatives. You also see other parts of UNFCCC, like the like the IPCC, which is the which is the UNC part which focuses on the climate science and the facts about climate change essentially, and seeing all these groups coming together and trying to see what are the challenges and opportunities that are there to really be able to engage in indigenous peoples and include their knowledge. And so yes, and one thing that I also wanted to highlight is this was my first time meeting an indigenous person from sub-Saharan Africa, specifically from South Africa. So it was amazing for me because I think the only time that I've heard of indigenous peoples in like the same people was in my history class in high school. So it was so for me it never went beyond the history, like the page. I thought it was something in the past. So I was amazed to see that although they are marginalized, but I was happy to see that they are there and they're at the forefront of fighting climate change and coming to these conferences. And also the other thing that I also realized moving around and also visiting the indigenous people's pavilion, like the building where there were a lot of pavilions from different indigenous people's communities, was that everywhere I was looking, I was seeing art, I was seeing demonstrations, I was seeing presentations, and the main common thing that I was seeing was we should phase out fossil fuels. So that was a really powerful message that I saw across the board, like either it's demonstrations, either it's the ads. I was just saying we have to phase out fossil fuels. And I also write extensively about my experience and just observing about the indigenous people's participation at COP28 in the Kiwana Now blog, and I've linked it here. So after the meeting, feel free to go and look out for other things that I observed there in regards to this topic. Yes, and then finally, I think initially I talked about that I had expectations of like I wanted the adoption of the loss and damage fund, and that was interesting to see that even on the first day of COP, that was the first thing that happened, that the presidency announced that the adoption of the loss and damage fund. So that was amazing to even set the energy for the subsequent days or even targets that people were aiming for the subsequent days. I think that was great. So I think I give credit to all the people that worked really, really hard for this to happen over the 2023 leading up to the conference. But I think, however, like if you can see from my slides, at the end of the conference, I think it's a positive that at the end of the conference, there was about $700 million pledged into to the fund, which is a good thing. But when you're comparing it to the targets, I think it's considerably fall short of the targets, because according to the United Nations Environment Program 2022 Adaptation Gap Report, the estimated annual, like per year, fund that needs to be raised is 400 billion for the loss and damage fund. So it falls very short of that target. And then the other thing also that also surprised me was the consensus also included the text. Many, I think, reporters everywhere were reporting about that COP28 had this phrase of phase away from fossil fuels, which is a step, one step ahead of finding solutions for climate change by talking about the main cause of climate change, which is burning fossil fuels. So I think this is a first step ahead, but I think in any climate negotiations, there are always there's always like a give and take. And I think the other thing that you can also see, like the same text that it also says phase out away from fossil fuels, also mentions some technologies which I think are even referred by many websites, like by indigenous people's many groups, saying that for example, technologies like carbon capture, they are good technologies, yes, but they have a potential to stray us away from actually doing what we need to do, which is phasing away fossil fuels. So I think I wanted to mention that as well. And I also sum up my experience of at COP28 and just giving my experience from the people that I met, the experience that I had as a person and as a research student through this blog. So you can check that out as well. I think I'm done here. So thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward to your questions after Citi's presentation.
Great. Thank you very much, Nyasha. And Mercedes, are you ready? I think you're, yeah, there you go.
All right, so good morning. I'm Mercedes. I think I've been already properly introduced. I won't say much. So I'll just begin right away with my presentation. Okay. So I'll be talking about what I have been doing in the climate space before Michigan Tech. The pre-COP workshop experience that I prepared me to take advantage or even better appreciate COP, my COP experience, and what I think the way forward should be in regarding my areas of interest. So my presentation would focus on experiential education for sustainable development. So before COP, I worked with the Ghana Center for Democratic Development as a programs and research assistant. And as part of the projects that I worked on the mining development scorecard, where the focus of the project was on social justice and environmental justice and how accountable mining districts are for revenues generated from mining resources and how it's plowed back into development of the people in the communities. So I worked on that project. I also worked as a co-chair, still a co-chair of the Environmental and Climate Action Group of the All African Students Union. I've done quite a number of works in the Student Union, as I was a former National Secretary of the National Union of Ghana Students. So I've worked in that space for a while, and my focus have mostly been on youth participation and engagement in the climate process. I also have an NGO called the Green League, where the focus is on educating educators, community leaders, and young people on climate issues to influence climate action. Because for me, I think education begins or is the core of inspiring or influencing climate action. And then I also work with the Ghana Cocoa Board at the Quality Control Company division, where I worked on some research on the cocoa industry as well, and how climate change is currently impacting cocoa production in Ghana. So before COP, there was a pre-COP workshop organized by the Yale Network in collaboration with the Smithsonian Museum, and thankfully to Professor Sarah Green, some of us were able to apply and we got selected. Myself and Nyasha attended the pre-COP workshop in Washington, DC. Was fully funded by the network, thankfully, and thanks to Professor Green. And from the workshop, I came across the EY and YA Worldwide Global Generational Sustainability Survey, which sought to assess young people and their willingness to influence climate action, learn about climate change, and also assess their knowledge on climate issues. So they established the desire of young people for climate literacy. It also established the fact that there's limited knowledge, which is what the second most highlighted barrier to climate action and achieving sustainability, and also established the significance of education in inspiring climate action, advocating for policies that focuses on fossil fuel divestment and other things. From the workshop, our capacity was built through practical projects. I had a project where my team members were from UConn, University of Connecticut, where we worked on greening the cities. We presented on our project outcomes, and per the lectures we received and the knowledge we received, I was better prepared for COP, and also established valuable partnerships for future engagement. So now at COP, I hosted a panel on the role of student and youth-led organizations in experiential education. I think from the beginning of my presentation, it's quite clear that I'm quite enthused and interested in climate education because, like I said, I feel it's the core of everything to influence climate action all over and also reach targets that have been set by the IPCC. So at COP, I hosted this session in the Just Not Pavilion. Okay. So some key highlights from the session. Was that young people remain the most vulnerable to climate crisis, hence the need for not just climate education, but an experiential climate education to influence action and even policies. And the fact that climate skills are needed to tackle climate crisis and solve unemployment challenges in some parts of the country, of the world, especially the developing countries, where the options of the youth are quite limited and there's growing unemployment challenges as well. So young people could take advantage of climate skills to prepare themselves for future jobs in these areas to reduce unemployment challenges as well. What was also highlighted was the critical role of technology in enhancing access, inclusion, and building skills of young people. And also the fact that it's important that education be central to this climate change agenda in order to influence political action. Some other highlights were the fact that it's important to enhance partnerships and inclusion of young people in the NDC developments in the various countries and other critical decisions as well, because young people are most vulnerable. to whatever decisions we make today. It is important that we educate the educator, because one of the research also pointed to the fact that in as much as teachers or educators are willing to teach, they themselves do not feel capable enough to teach them because they have limited knowledge on the climate change phenomenon. So it is important to educate the educator. It is important that we finance and invest into climate education to develop adequate strategies to better prepare people to influence climate action. And also the fact that town-gown partnerships are essential in building climate resilience and tackling climate crisis. Where town-gown partnerships will be the fact that education will be not just in the academic space, but education will transcend the academic space to the communities as well. And by building the capacity of these community members, the town-gown can build a solid partnership that can build upon indigenous knowledge, can build upon whatever knowledge the community leaders have, influence and build their capacities to help build climate resilience and tackle climate crisis. So some other key highlights from other related events, because I'm particular about the education bit, I followed the UNESCO, they had a declaration for their greening education partnership at COP. And at the core of the partnership is getting every learner climate ready. I had to put in the bracket everyone, because beyond the learners, educators need to be ready, community leaders need to be ready. Everyone, no matter their educational level or wherever they are situated, need to be ready, and not just the learner. 41 countries signed this declaration, and the focus of this declaration is acknowledging the critical role of education in inspiring climate action. So, against the backdrop of this declaration, the UNESCO conducted a research, and they found that around half of the 100 countries reviewed had no mention of climate change in their national curriculum. While 95% of the surveyed primary and secondary teachers felt that teaching climate change is important, less than 30% expressed readiness to teach it. That's because of the limited knowledge and skills on the phenomenon. They also found that 70% of young people cannot explain climate change, or can only explain its broad principles, or do not know anything about it. The 4 pillars of the action of the Greening Education Partnership is greening schools, greening curriculum, greening teacher training and education systems and capacities, and greening communities. So it addresses everyone in the community and not just focus on educational institutions. At the end of the day, everyone's capacity gets built, and we all together work on mitigating climate crisis. So the commitment to targeted actions of the Green Education Partnership include adapt and mitigating existing climate challenges, and investment into climate education to provide better strategies to further build the capacities of other people. So based on all of these, my pre-COP experience, my prior experience to Michigan Tech, my COP experience, I think that the way forward is recognizing the critical role of education in realizing the set targets. In as much as education may seem to others as a bare minimum, but people can't work at what they don't understand. People can contribute to things that they don't have any need for. And education is the only way to build the capacities and knowledge of people on the phenomenon so that they can better contribute to this. And as a TA for one of our courses this semester, I suggested an activity for the students, which was on the water footprints game, where students, after playing this water footprints game, are able to tell how much water wastage they are contributing to and how that impacts emissions all over the world or even the climate change phenomenon. So with these knowledge and skills, students themselves are able to be more particular about their actions henceforth, because they know that even the minute things that they do that they probably do not know influences or contributes further to the destruction of our world, they would get to know, they will take better decisions, and they would act better. So it's best to recognize the critical role of education in realizing set targets. We must ensure inclusion, equity, and fairness in access to climate education, because there are people in some parts of the world who do not have access to internet, do not have access to materials. How do we reach these people? Are we going to center everything on the internet? How do we reach these other people that are cut off, that are so poor that they don't have access to these? How are we being intentional about empowering young people in climate vulnerable communities all over the world who may not have access or even the privilege to access some of these? So we have to ensure inclusion, equity, and fairness in access to climate education. We have to invest and also build effective partnerships with key stakeholders. So I would say that education remains the most ordinary but most efficient global strategy to achieving set goals by inspiring climate actions all over the globe without having to mark time for political action. Because I have realized that one of the factors impeding our realization of our set targets is lack of political will. So while we wait for political leaders to have the will to make a change, what do we do as a people? If we are better educated on this phenomenon, we wouldn't have to mark time for political action. We would take our action ourselves, because it's ordinary people that can effect change without really having to wait for political leaders. And in tackling this people crisis, it is the collective actions of ordinary people that can save the planet, not the few political leaders, not the few NGOs. It is how the ordinary people or masses are built to influence actions. How else do we inspire action and attitudinal change if not through education and capacity building? People are only motivated to act when they clearly understand the consequences of their inactions. So if people do not understand the consequences of their inactions, how do they act? How then do we get people to understand? But through education. So I'll end this my presentation by saying a thank you to the KUUF for this opportunity to present, and a special thank you to Professor Sarah Green for the opportunity, for the pre-COP experience, Professor Makrulo for sharing this opportunity, and the Yale Network for funding my pre-COP experience in DC, and the Social Science Department of the MTU for also funding my trip to Dubai and for making my COP experience possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Mercedes.